Does the gentlewoman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2646 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2646, a bill to reauthorize the United States-Jordan Defense Cooperation Act of 2015 and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Ross-Layton, and the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Boyle, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I might consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank Chairman Royce and Ranking Member Engel for their support for this measure and for their leadership in helping to bring H.R. 2646, the United States-Jordan Defense Cooperation Extension Act, to the floor today. I also want to thank my friends and colleagues Nita Lowy, Ted Deutsch, Hal Rogers, and Adam Schiff for joining me in introducing this bill. This is a strong bipartisan bill that underscores the importance of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan in helping both of our nations work toward achieving shared goals of security and stability in the Middle East. It acknowledges that what we have all known for many years, and that is that His Majesty and the Kingdom are indispensable allies in the fight against radicalism and terror in the region. Jordan and its military have played important roles in many of our counter-ISIS operations, and in many ways, our relationship with Jordan has served as a force multiplier and has allowed the coalition to make all the positive gains that we have made over the past year or so. But that would have not been possible without a robust foreign military financing, FMF, program that we have in place with our allies in Jordan. And that is why in 2015, Mr. Speaker, I introduced and the President signed in 2016 the U.S.-Jordan Defense Cooperation Act. This bill authorized the administration to enter into an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding with Jordan. Why? To increase our military cooperation with Jordan and to provide the kingdom with increased FMF assistance. It also allowed Jordan to be included in a list of close and trusted allies that are eligible for streamlined and expedited defense sales. Why is that important? Because Jordan is on the front lines in the fight against terror, and we rely heavily on Jordan's cooperation. That bill also authorized the administration to increase our economic support for the kingdom. We recognize the great contributions that Jordan has made in response to the Syrian refugee crisis. Since the Assad regime began its campaign of destruction, murdering over 500,000 people in the process, millions of Syrians have fled their war-torn nation. Hundreds of thousands, if not over 1 million Syrians, have crossed into the border into Jordan seeking refuge from the fighting. For a country of just a few million in population, an influx of this magnitude would strain the government's already limited resources. Yet, Jordan recognized the need to provide refuge to those fleeing the murderous Assad regime and its cronies, the Putin regime, and Iran and its proxy, the terror group Hezbollah. And we, in return, recognize the strategic importance of Jordan's security and stability, and that is why we must ensure that the kingdom does indeed have the resources that it needs, both in the fight against terror, but also in support of the larger refugee population. That Memorandum of Understanding was signed 3 years ago this week, and it ran through fiscal year 2017. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, Jordan's current and future security and stability are far from guaranteed. Most of the refugees remain, and despite having made great progress in defeating ISIS, the terror threat is far from being eliminated. That is why I authored this bill before us today, along with this bipartisan coalition of colleagues, to extend the provisions of the original U.S.-Jordan Defense Cooperation Act for another 5-year period through 2022. We need to enhance Jordan's military capacity and its local economy significantly, and it is my hope that our two governments will soon enter into renewed MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, at an increased level that meets the needs of the kingdom. In addition to extending the provisions of the Defense Cooperation Act, this bill provides for the establishment of a Jordanian enterprise fund. An enterprise fund would attract private investment and help entrepreneurs and small businesses create jobs in a way that would foster sustainable economic development in Jordan for the long term and in a self-sustaining fashion. Mr. Speaker, Jordan's security, Jordan's stability, they are both vital, not just for our ally, but they're vital for the region and for our own national security interests. So it is vital that we send a strong message, a bipartisan message of support. I urge my colleagues to support this measure. And Mr. Speaker, I yield the remainder of my time to the gentleman from California, our esteemed chairman, Chairman Royce, and ask unanimous consent that he be allowed to control that time.
Without objection, the gentleman from California will control the time. From California, Pennsylvania is recognized.
The gentleman from the Super Bowl champion city of Philadelphia, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, and I thank my colleague from the Foreign Affairs Committee, Congresswoman Ross Leighton, as well as my colleague, the ranking member of the Middle East Subcommittee, Ted Deutsch, for their work on this important piece of legislation. The United States-Jordan Defense Cooperation Extension Act would ensure Jordan's continued eligibility for a more streamlined process for accessing defense articles, acknowledging the very difficult challenges that Jordan faces from extremist organizations both within Jordan and on its borders. The legislation supports a new Memorandum of Understanding to enhance Jordan's military capacity and economic growth, and it authorizes an enterprise fund that would invest in Jordan's economy. I am glad that this bill reflects our comprehensive relationship with Oman, so vital at this point in history in the region. The legislation acknowledges the key role Jordan plays as a partner against ISIS or Daesh and as a home to thousands of Iraqi, Syrian, and Palestinian refugees. I would like to note the important work that Jordan does in facilitating cross-border assistance to Syria, preventing further destabilization. Jordan also plays a critical role in the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, and I hope that Jordan and Israel are able to soon return to the normal level of diplomatic cooperation. The bottom line is this: it is in our national security interest to work with Jordan on the security threats facing the region, as well as opportunities for economic growth within Jordan, and this bill will help advance both of those goals. I urge my colleagues to support it, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. We're here really to reaffirm a very important commitment that we have to one of our closest partners in the Middle East, and that's Jordan. And I think all of us agree that over the generations, it has been astounding the way Jordan has always offered safe haven, refuge through the generations to others. Now, this bill gives us an opportunity to continue that close working relationship that we have with Jordan, because as we know, Jordan is locked, has been locked in a struggle with ISIS, as Daesh, as they call it in that part of the world. And they've been involved on the battlefield, and this bill addresses both the military and economic elements, really, of the close relationship we have with Jordan. As they valiantly fight ISIS, Jordanians have struggled to absorb, most recently, more than 1 million Syrian refugees. And they're doing this, obviously, while coping with a tough economy, with an overburdened infrastructure, with high unemployment for their youth. I've been to some of the schools in Jordan to see the Jordanians as they once again reach out a hand of friendship to help those who are in this predicament. And although Jordan has successfully worked with the Millennium Challenge Corporation and the World Bank to address some of the economic challenges, it really has not been enough to create the level of vital economic growth needed in the circumstances that Jordan is in. Economic opportunity and prosperity in Jordan are one element of our bulwark against extremist groups, against the Iranian regime, the IRGC, who seek to spread chaos and destruction, and as ISIS seeks to spread death. And in addition to supporting existing efforts, including regional water and energy projects that will bring needed resources, will bring increased cooperation between neighbors, this bill calls for the establishment of an enterprise fund for Jordan. Now, this is a measure previously authorized, previously funded by this body, and this fund will help create economic opportunity through private-public partnership, through investments in small and medium enterprises. And it will also create market development in Jordan. Although not a familiar measure to many, enterprise funds have already been very successful in Tunisia, and we've seen that. We've seen that success. So I'll reserve the balance of my time, but I want to thank our colleagues for the support for this measure for our ally and friend, Jordan.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, we have no speakers on our side, so I will reserve.
I'll reserve the right to close, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
All right, thank you. I wasn't sure if there were any speakers on the other side, but I'm happy to. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to go ahead and close now and just reiterate what I said earlier. This is such important legislation and really achieves both goals on the security front as well as the economic front. I urge its adoption and happy to yield the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from California is recognized.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman's recognized.
In closing, I'd like to thank my colleagues. I'd like to thank the ranking member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Mr. Engel, but I'd also like to thank Mr. Eagle over there, Brendan Boyle, and I would like to thank Eliana Ross-Leitonen as well. Jordan, of course, is a key partner in our struggle against ISIS and against the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and other destabilizing actors in the Middle East. And this bill supports our joint efforts on the battlefield and will help Jordan achieve much-needed economic growth. I urge my colleagues to support this bill and once again extend the arm of friendship to our closest partner, Jordan. And I yield back. And I would like to ask unanimous consent that Mr. Boyle be allowed to reclaim his unused time.
Thank you. I thank the chairman. We have one of the two main sponsors for the bill who's just joined us, who wants the opportunity to speak. And so we'll go ahead and yield to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Deutsch.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I thank my friend from Pennsylvania. And I greatly appreciate the chairman for yielding back some time. I want to thank Chairman Ross-Leitonen for her tremendous leadership in helping advance H.R. 2646, the United States-Jordan Defense Cooperation Extension Act. This bill is important because our partnership with Jordan is important. And I want to quickly explain why my constituents back home believe that this is important. Those good news headlines that we've read about U.S. military success against ISIS are in part thanks to Jordan. Jordan's a key partner in the international coalition to defeat ISIS and has flown airstrikes right alongside us. Just last week, the U.S. finished delivery of Black Hawk helicopters to Oman that are used to take terrorists off the battlefield, helping to keep our nations, both of our nations, safer. The bill before us today ensures that Jordan continues to get this critical military assistance, but it does more than that. It also ensures that Jordan gets the economic support it needs to care for over 1 million Syrian refugees now living in Jordan as a result of the war next door. This influx has taken a huge toll on Jordan's resources. Today, we are helping ease that burden with emergency services, education, and access to clean water. In fact, Chairman Ross-Leighton and I had an opportunity just a few years ago to see firsthand a USAID project, a wastewater treatment facility that today is providing access to clean water for millions of Jordanians. This is the right thing to do, both for American strategic interests and for American values. Jordan's stability is vital to regional stability. Our commitment to an enduring strategic partnership with Jordan is critical to our mission of defeating ISIS, caring for the victims of war, and pursuing end-of-conflict agreements throughout the Middle East. So I want to again thank my colleagues for their bipartisan support of this piece of legislation. I urge all of us to vote for H.R. 2646. Again, I thank my friend from Pennsylvania, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back the balance of my time.
And the gentleman yields, and then gentleman from California.
I yield back the balance of my time, Mr.
So
Speaker.
for California yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 2646? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.